So we will pretend that those are stitched, blanket stitched. And once they are blanket stitched, then you put your second penny on. And I don't have a lot of the second pennies here to show you, but there are 3 different sizes. There's a big one, 1.5 inch. There is a smaller one, and there is, I think, another size. There should be 3 sizes, so the other one is a larger size, 1.5 inch, and I don't have that here. So there are 3 sizes, not a lot in each size. Mostly this size and this size. There is a couple, maybe a half dozen I'll be giving you that's a little bit smaller, and you do them all through the rug. This is supposed to look as though you were just using odds and ends and you didn't have a lot of wool to do everything in a good pattern. It's a hit and miss. So when you're putting these on, these are stitched, when you are putting these on, just be mindful that you don't want a high contrast. That would be a high contrast. So that would look better. That's a low contrast. This would look okay. This, you don't want really that with that. That's okay. Okay, that's good. Don't really like that one. So you just go through and you put your pennies on wherever you think. You go back 10 feet and have a look. If something really catches your eye, if you look at it and, oh, that one's terrible, my eye automatically goes to that one at 10 feet, that one's wrong, change it. So that's about it, really. You do your pennies, your second row, and once that's finished, you do the 10 foot. Once your second row is stitched, then you just have the binding to do. So I know this is difficult when I don't have a sample to show you and when I'm not actually doing the stitching, but it really is very simple. I'll go over the main parts of it at the end of the video. So now I'm going to show you a bit about doing the edging. So now it's stitched. The only thing we need to do is put the binding on, and I'm sending 1-inch binding. You're not going to be using 1 inch, you're going to be cutting it down because it needs a very thin binding. So in the penny rug class, we didn't get to the point where I showed you how to do bindings, very thin bindings. So I do have, I think it's in 4 parts, binding your rugs. Very, very detailed, and everything is there for the information except one thing, something I do now that I didn't really do back then. And I will show you what I do, and then we will post the old videos finishing your rug with the bindings. So what I do, let's see, where am I on my video? So in my side, the wrong side, I use a 1/2 inch. And I draw a line with the pen. That is my stitching line. No matter if I'm going to be having a very tiny 1/4 inch binding, or if I'm going to be doing a 1/2 inch binding. This is what I do. I don't do a 1/4 inch here because it's too small. I don't cut any binding less than 1 inch because it's too small and too finicky, and the cotton's going to fray and that type of thing. So I always cut, and then I cut larger and mark larger, and then I trim, and then I adjust and cut the binding to fold over. So that's the only thing different than what I'm going to post with this video on binding your rugs in 4 parts. So once I have that done, and I measure and have extra to make sure I have enough, I use the line and I sort of judge it with my fingernail, and I put my line next to the edge of my pennies, and I can feel it with my fingernail, put it straight, and then I use that line. Let's see, can I get there? I use that line as my stitching guide. I just stitch a straight line, and I'm not going to do it on this one, but that is my stitching line. So I would do that all the way around, and then join at the when the 2 tails meet. The thing with very thin cotton binding is really you don't need to do the miter. I show you that in the binding rugs video that I'm going to put up, but it's not necessary. You can just butt and do it. Now with this one, you're going to round your binding. So I would have the line, and I would just round it with a bit of give around the penny, so that we're going to have a nice round edge, and you'll see that on the rug. So you just keep going like that, put your pins in as you go, and you're going to have a bit of extra here, but it does work. You just pin it, and then you go on this side, and you keep doing it until you finish. Now I'm going to try and put it on a piece of fabric somewhere where I can actually cut it and show you. So I'll do that in the next one. So in this demonstration, we're going to do an awful lot of pretending here, because I just can't do up this with basting and doing it. It's almost like I have to do a whole kit. So I did my string, my binding with my 1/2 inch line, and I've lined it up with the edge of my pennies, and I've done it on this, and that is my line that I stitch with, and it's so easy to do. You can really get a nice clean edge that way. Now normally this would be up, this would be cut even, it would be folded up, folded back, folded, cut, I would cut it there, it would be folded back, and then it would be folded under, just like that. So there you have your small binding. Cut, if you're using something thick, you're probably going to have to cut this a little bit down. This is very thin, and your kit is thin, so just make sure that you trim this up here so that it's nice and even, and then I would iron it. I always iron it on this side when I have my stitching done. Then I fold it up, back, and fold it under. And just down below your stitching line is where you're going to put this. And then you're going to do that little invisible stitch. So you would need to fold that down and pin it. Make sure that you have your give around the corners, but it makes for a very nice little binding. That's going to look very nice. And that's what the rug needs. It needs a small binding. Now, if you're basting these, I wanted to show you. Kind of basted those. If you do just an ordinary basting, they move around, and you can adjust them. If you do double basting, this one has a double basting. You can still move it around, but it sort of stays in place. So a double basting, and you should do a double basting if you are basting on both the David Star, the edges, and on this one. That's a single baste. You go in and you lock it again. So I think I've covered everything except the stitching and the thread, and I'm just going to do a quick review. I'm sorry that I don't have the original and that this is such a haphazard way of showing you this, but it's so very, very easy. First, you put your outside pennies on. Remember, you do a 1/2 inch first. You can go in more later, but you have to start with that 1/2 inch on all sides for a row. Then you fill in. Doesn't matter how they are, how close they are. If you find they're too open, that's when you bring it in and you do a little bit more than your 1/2 inch if needed. Make sure that your pennies are straight on the outside for the binding. The binding, we just used a pen and did a 1/2 inch line. That line goes even with your pennies. You can feel it with your fingers when you're putting it on. It's a nice straight line. So you stitch that. Then, and I should mention, if you find that you think you may have a problem cutting it down, because you are going to have to cut that down a bit in order to fold the fabric over. It should be a 1/4 inch instead of, you don't want all this fabric. So you do need to cut it down. You can do it by eye, or when you do your markings, you can do 2. And that's what it would be. This is your stitch line, and this is the line that you would cut down, and then you would fold it over. So you cut off your excess to a 1/4 inch. You fold it over, and I seem to have lost my sample that I did. But you fold it over and fold it under, and most of you know about that, how to do that. You edge it around, ease it around for a round binding. You don't want it sticking out like that. Top pennies first, and they are stitched. Then you put the second pennies on. This is before you do your binding. Make sure you do the 10-foot rule when you put your pennies on. Whatever catches your eye when you first look after 10 feet, that's what you change. You have 3 sizes, mostly 2 sizes, but I'm going to add a couple small ones. Scatter the sizes out. Don't have all the sizes in one place. Basically, just look at the photos that are on the group and that I have in this video, and I don't think you'll have any problems. The last thing, and what I haven't mentioned yet, is the string. I am going to use the thin wool thread, and it is wonderful. It's so amazing. I just love stitching with it. So I'm going to see if I can, let's see, bring that up. There. The wool thread is thin, and you can get your small stitches. That is how you get those tiny small stitches that we've seen in the antique rugs. you need the thin thread to do it, and this works so good. I'd like to have that thread a bit lighter, and I'm going to try my best to get lighter thread, because this color thread sort of blends in with everything, but that's the way it should be stitched. Haphazardly, don't worry about them being neat, and that's how an antique rug should look. So a bit about the fabrics. As I said before, very old, worn, it's going to be stained, very thin. The pennies are very thin, there's no thick pennies. Everything in this rug is made to look old, and most of it is old. I don't think there's anything new in it except the thread. Really, you couldn't reproduce this rug exactly as the kit would be, because even if you did have the old quilting and old wool, you still wouldn't have the colors. You wouldn't have my colors and that sort of thing. And I'm trying to keep my prices as low as possible, so do remember that shipping is included in the price, and shipping for that would probably be between $8 to $10. I'll say probably $8, because it's going to be light. So that's reflected in the price, so don't forget that. I am shipping Canada Post until I go back with my company where I print the US postage, and then I have good tracking with that one. So I hope you enjoy the kit. One more thing I wanted to show you. I was going to do it, but it's too close to Christmas. But I may give you an idea to do one yourself. You can see it. It's a Christmas stocking. Probably not going to show the right colors, but that's the idea. It's a stocking stretcher. It's a long, I mean, someone has got a large foot. That is long. But it's one of the old wooden stocking stretchers, and I just added pennies. And they are too light, too bright for me. I don't like it. But still, it's a really nice idea to put these little tiny ones in. So I thought I'd show you that. So as I said, the Dee Kits are on the website, and there are only going to be that many. If by some chance something happens that this part I don't get 16, I have a fallback, and it's this. It's another very old piece from the back of a quilt. I don't really, and I would change the color on this a bit, but this one I've always saved for myself, so if I do happen to, something happens that I run out on the 16, this is what I'm going to substitute for the base. Okay, well, I think that's it. I'm really tired talking to myself today, so I hope you enjoy making the Dee Kit. It's a very nice kit, and it's very easy to do, and it's going to look very old. So I hope you have a good rest of the week and weekend. I think this is going to be my last video for this week, but I'm going to try to go in and do my mail, do my messages, and try to get the kitties so that I know what I'm doing with those. Next week, the next part of your David Star goes out. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the videos today, and have a great day.